Well, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us. We are delighted to have you here. A good day so far. Things are excellent conference. We are here to talk about Canada. Canada as a country, as part of a bigger region, North America, and of course, as part of the whole world. The global seed sector is more interconnected than ever, and I know that many people in this room here around us and people listening at home are thinking about where to invest, where to scale, and how to position innovation across whole regions. North America, of course, is home to some 240 million arable acres, which makes it the largest regional seed market in the world. It counts for somewhere in the range of 40% of global seed revenue. So for any company operating globally, the North American opportunity is clearly very significant in scale, in market access, in influence. Canada, as part of that region, has, I think it's fair to say, traditionally been viewed as reliable and stable ag market, but perhaps not one of the fastest moving or simple on the regulatory side. And what's really interesting right now is that we're seeing quite a shift in tone and I think intent across Canada, growing momentum from both the government side and the industry side to make it easier and faster for seed innovation to move from market entry to commercial access. And importantly, that includes innovation that is coming into Canada through international partnerships and investment. Yeah. So that raises the question that we wanted to talk about here today. What role should Canada play for international companies who are deciding where to invest, where to build, where to grow across North America? So Canada within a bigger regional context. My name is Madeline. I am the General Manager and Executive Vice President of Operations at SeedWorld, and I am delighted to introduce you to two experts here who bring quite different perspectives, I think, to this conversation. Greg MacDonald is Agriculture Councillor at Canada's Mission to the European Union in Brussels, where, Greg, you lead Canada's engagement with the EU on agricultural issues. And you really bring a global perspective on how Canada is positioning itself within international agriculture on trade issues. And Dan, thank you for joining us as well. You are CEO of Seeds Canada. You are deeply involved in this, is it fair to call it an industry transformation happening within Canada to unlock more value from seed innovation and strengthen Canada's position in terms of innovation, competitiveness globally. So thank you to both of you for joining me. I want to jump right into the conversation here. So let me start with a hard one. If I am an international seed company and I'm trying to decide where to invest my next dollar in seed innovation, which country, regionally, why Canada, and why now? Can I start with you, Greg?
Sure, yeah. First of all, thank you for having me for this discussion today. I think it's very important and very, very timely. So from the Government of Canada's perspective, I would say Canada should be viewed as a preferred investment destination and one of the best places to invest in the world. And why do I say it? I would say we offer global companies a stable political and economic environment for investment, so at the macro level, through our various trade agreements, access to global markets. We have the world's most educated workforce, so in terms of looking for talent in companies, Canada's university networks produce the best talent or in the world, I would say. And we also have very competitive business costs and abundant natural resources. So maybe just to dive into that a bit, in terms of access to markets, we have free trade agreements that cover 51 different countries and gives us privileged access to 1.5 billion consumers around the world, and we export agricultural goods to almost 200 countries. So we are a stable base where we do have privileged market access globally. In terms of our business environment, we have a large agricultural base, as you alluded to in your opening remarks, favorable tax environment for investment, and our innovation ecosystem, I would say, positions Canada uniquely across the agriculture supply chain. And I know we'll get into it more through the course of this discussion, but when you look at the research and development, the enabling regulatory frameworks, I think it really puts Canada on the map as where companies should consider to invest. The final thing I would say is the Government of Canada under our Prime Minister Mark Carney has made investment attraction a key priority of the government. It's in the mandate letters of ministers, including the Agriculture and Agri-Food Minister, because we see it as a driver of economic resilience and growth for Canada. So I'll stop there, but looking forward to the discussion.
Yeah, I think for myself, it's, you talked about it, scale of opportunity is one of the things, stability, and I would say structure, and I'll talk a little bit more about the structure, and then I think why now, we're at an inflection point for breeding for a lot of our organizations and a lot of our crops, and an inflection point is time for an opportunity. When I think about structure for a company that would be thinking about coming to Canada, we've got over 3,000 seed growers, over 500 different independent seed processing organizations that are there. We've got a great seed analyst network, we've got distribution, we have some breeders. We have some of the best academic and public breeding systems that you can collaborate and work with. And then, as Greg said, we have also this opportunity for private investment that the government is very focused on and driving. So I think the combination of the public, the private, opportunity for collaboration and finding new ways at this point of inflection is a really good opportunity for any company that's thinking about wanting to grow their business globally.
So now, as a proud Canadian, I of course like hearing all of these positive things about Canada, but I want to push you for specifics. So I think that what I'm hearing is that the tone from especially the government has shifted in recent times, maybe from can we regulate this to now becoming much more how fast can we enable it? So that is a tone shift, but can you give me specifics on what has really changed even in, say, the last couple or handful of years? Why don't I start this one with you, Dan?
Yeah, I think for me, it's there is a tone change. I've been in the seed business for over 25 years, and from the government level, I've never seen the direction and the alignment from the Prime Minister through every single different ministry. And it's not just agriculture, it's health, it's mining, it's every place about how Canada's at a spot that we must innovate. We must do things different. We must look at what is the economic reality to help drive the innovation and not over-regulate ourselves and take some of the red tape that we have, which I would argue in many cases we have too much red tape and we need to make that better. And I've never in my 25 years in the business seen the drive and the alignment at the government to have those conversations.
Greg, what are you hearing?
Yeah, so I would say you're absolutely right in terms of the tone has changed, but why has the tone changed? Because Canada is looking to become more innovation friendly in terms of our regulatory environment and attracting business, building our economic resilience. So how do we do that in a area like seeds? So yes, the core principle that we follow is science and risk-based approaches to our regulations to ensure there's food safety, environmental safety, animal health rationales are all there, but how can that be done in a way that creates an innovative environment? So I think one concrete example you could look at is how Canada updated its guidance when looking at products of gene editing. So over the last couple of years, we undertook updating the guidance on how gene-edited products would be looked at and approved in Canada. And it really looked at what the existing science and risk-based literature out there, the technologies, and the decision on the guidance looked at, we will regulate the product based on the product characteristics rather than the technologies, which goes in a large part to future-proofing the regulation. As technologies change, it's not about regulating necessarily that technology, but the outcome and the product characteristics. So we think we provided clarity through our regulators, both Health Canada and the Canadian Food Inspection Agency, on providing companies and seed developers with the clarity necessary to seek approvals or to see if there's pre-market assessments required. I think that's a real good example of going from your question of how can we regulate this to how can the regulations be fit for purpose that enable innovation and that enable alignment with some of our key trading partners, because ultimately as a trading nation, Canada is looking at a spot where we can create innovation, enable it, but then export our innovation, and international alignment and cooperation are quite important in this regard.
So from your position in Brussels then, you're seeing Canada truly acting differently, not just describing itself differently.
Yeah, I would say we're describing ourselves differently because we are acting differently, and the government's priorities reflect that. So we are living in a world that has changed. Our Prime Minister has pointed that out more eloquently than I ever would in his speech at Davos earlier this year. But one of the key priorities from an international context has been diversifying Canada's trade to reduce reliance on any single market. And one of the benchmarks we put out as a government has been doubling our non-US exports over the next decade. So that requires real work. From my vantage point in Brussels, last June we had a leader summit and we struck a new Canada-EU strategic partnership where it's about deepening supply chain with the EU, looking at where opportunities can be had. If you look more globally, our trade agreement agenda is expanding very rapidly. Underpinning that is the WTO rules, especially when you're looking at sanitary and phytosanitary and technical regulations. But how can we go further? We've recently concluded free trade agreements with Indonesia, a large growing market in Southeast Asia, with Ecuador. We have a very active negotiation agenda with ASEAN countries, Mercosur, India, UAE, looking at expanding the comprehensive and progressive agreement for the Trans-Pacific Partnership with new members. So we're trying to knock down barriers. We're trying to get Canada access to all various markets around the world with the goal of diversifying our trade to increase our economic resilience. So I would say that that's kind of the actions to the words that you hear from our government leadership.
Excellent. Dan, I want to expand on what you mentioned earlier. So we've spoken in very positive terms so far, but you did mention red tape. So what needs to still change? What steps still need to happen in order to make Canada a first choice for international innovation investors?
Yeah, so I think as we think about red tape, I also think we need to look at ourselves and think about what it is. Because there's this, as I've started as my new role at Seeds Canada, balancing perception and reality. So what is the perception, what's reality? Perception is reality in many cases, and I would highlight variety registration in Canada. So variety registration in Canada, a lot of people say, hey, that's an obstacle. And Greg, I think the government gets blamed for variety registration in many cases. But variety registration in Canada is industry-led, government-enabled. So the same system that regulates variety registration or how crops get to market for corn, soybeans, canola, cereals is the same. So if the industry wants in cereals to adopt it, then we need as an industry to get together and come with changes. Now there is a Canada brand in cereals that is critically important on the global stage, and we do not want to disrupt that because our quality output is so high and we have some great customers, as Greg talked about, that we want to expand our trade. But there are some smaller crops that we could look at. How do we reduce the red tape on some smaller crops that have very hard to get things to market and be able to add innovation at a faster pace? And then challenge ourselves in some of the other areas to say, you know, we've got that and we have the Canada brand, but are there ways to innovate to make it even simpler and more predictable for companies to get products to market while not losing the Canadian brand that is critically important?
Well said. Yeah. Let me ask each of you, maybe Greg, I'll start with you, and from an investor lens, if you were talking to a close buddy, a really good friend, who runs an international seed company, so someone in here, and he or she says, so what is the biggest hurdle right now I'm going to run into if I try investing into Canada? What would you say?
Yeah, well, first I gave my answer to the first question as to why you should be considering Canada. But of course, we can't go to a discussion with rose-colored glasses. You have to look kind of with eyes wide open in terms of the environment you're looking at. So the first piece kind of builds on Dan's point is ensure you have a good understanding of the regulatory regime, all the various elements in Canada. But I would also look at how it aligns or where there could be some differences with some of our key international partners. So if you're making that investment, ensure you have kind of the full picture down to the regulatory points of trying to ensure that you have that and you can build that into your timelines. To overcome that hurdle, what I would say as a government official is we already talked about how we've taken steps to streamline our regulatory processes in terms of gene-edited products, providing clarity and transparency on how innovation can be enabled and can get to market faster. But I would also say when we are exporting, when you're looking at Canada as your base and then exporting either the seed or through the value chain, is the government of Canada places a large priority on international cooperation. So talking to our trade partners about regulatory alignment, talking to our trade partners about policy coherence. So if a company is coming to Canada, you have a large network of government officials, both in Canada that can help you navigate, but also in international markets. We have our Trade Commissioner service abroad that can help in terms of advocacy, help understanding markets and regulations to get in. So while it can be seen as a hurdle, I think there are the tools available to help overcome the challenges.
So Dan, if you happen to be best friends with the same person as Greg there, and you're standing beside Greg as he gives that answer, what would you add?
I think, as I would think about it, I would just say farmers really get into innovation as well in Canada. So if you're looking for opportunity for investment, that there has been a lot of adoption of new technology. So they're not afraid to adopt new technology. So my build on what Greg has said is that when you do come to Canada and you have those things known, the adoption of new technology is rapid. You look at canola, that's a Canadian solution that is over 21 million acres now. We have the same in pulses in Western Canada. Soybeans were introduced in Western Canada, went from 0 to over 3 million acres and are down to 1.5 now, but there's new adoption of technology in corn, soybeans, all the different crops, and I think that innovation mindset and adoption by farmers in Canada is a reason why you would want to invest.
Okay, well, and a really excellent point there. So your feeling is farmers are ready to adopt new technology at scale.
Yeah, and I think that they've proven that technology at scale. When you think about, outside of seed, if you think about direct seeding in Western Canada, that's changed radically over the number of years where they plant direct seed into last year's seed bed. They've adopted direct cutting of cereals and canola. They've adopted fungicides and new technology in seeds, and whether it's biotech or just new genetics across all the different areas. And I think all those things matter. And I think something we haven't talked about that does make Canada a very exciting spot from a sustainability standpoint as well. The Global Institute for Food Security did a big project and said, our Canadian farmers produce some of the most sustainable crops globally, just on the way they bring it to market. Like, they didn't change practices. They've been changing this. They didn't do it to hit sustainability. They did it because that's the most important way to build and grow crops in their area. But it starts with seed and starts with adopting things, and it's innovation through the whole farming cycle that they've adopted.
So let's switch gears just a tiny bit. I said at the front end of our conversation that we would talk about Canada as a country, but also as part of a bigger region of North America. So can you speak a little bit about how international companies might translate opportunity into Canada into something, an opportunity to access the whole North American marketplace? Shall I throw it to you, Greg?
Yeah, sure. I would say the short answer is yes, it can be a launch pad to get into the North American market. And I would say the pace of the innovation will directly correlate with the regulatory alignment we have in North America for products. So you can commercialize in Canada, and then you can get it into the broader North American market, US and Mexico. And I think when you go back again to our regulatory framework, you can have the clarity on how a product will be approved, how it gets to market. And we do have then access to, like you said, the largest seed market collectively in the world. So it is that launching pad. We do have the favorable conditions to get started. We have the strong workforce. So I think that it does. And I'm not just saying that. Canada has a track record of launching innovation, from the classic story of canola and going global with that. But we have a track record of having an innovative ecosystem in plant breeding and seed development, and bringing it into the North American market. And I think we're continued well positioned to do that.
Did you want to add at all to that, Dan?
I think if you look at many of the crops that we have in North America now, they are a North American breeding system, whether you're in corn, soybeans, canola, some of the cereals programs, but there is a lot of that happens already. That is the foundation of how things work in North America, where it is truly a North American breeding infrastructure, which has its challenges sometimes if we have challenges with our partner to the south. But we work through those things and try and make sure that we're there. But I do think from an investment standpoint, we can look at Canada to say, how can we do the investment, and then how do you access, like what Greg talked about, some of the broader North American market.
I'd like to bring up something that is maybe a touch painful to many in the egg industry in Canada, and I just want to sort of frame it for our audience here. There have been some research station closures and some funding shifts in Canada. So how do you suggest that the audience, an international audience, interpret that?
Well, I think, yes, we absolutely have some closures, significant closures across Canada of some stations that have impacted critical scientists and critical locations that we're concerned about. I think on a global scale, every country has had some impact of that. It's not abnormal. Agriculture cuts in Canada are not alone. There's cuts across the area. However, for those cuts that are happening in agriculture, what we're doing is engaging with other agricultural groups to have a conversation with the government to make sure that we truly understand what the cuts are. We have some concern in some areas that seed multiplication, for instance, that there's an area that doesn't lose anything. There's a plan that they have. We'd like to challenge some of that to make sure that as any of these changes happen, that there's discussions about new ways of doing it, finding partners, having universities in different areas. We're in that uneasy area where they don't have the answers. We all want the answers now. I think what we're trying to focus on, what is the outcome that we need from these long term, and then in the short term, we can't have anything that is done where there's harm, irreparable harm done, where we've got seed multiplication or other things that we completely lose something that we cannot fix in the future. So having the dialogue with the government and challenging in those areas to make sure that we've got the research that we need. I think we also have to be open to find new ways to do things, that there's new and better ways, if there are. If they're not, then as ag industry, we need to be aligned and speak to the government as one voice as we can to make sure that that we don't lose something that can't be fixed.
Yeah.
Well said. Greg?
Yeah, no, the government of Canada went through some operational expense reductions, but what can I say about agriculture research in Canada is there is still a strong support for ag research and development and innovation, in particular in Canada. We do, and we are looking at how to adjust where and how research is funded and delivered across the entire system. That changes, that reflects the kind of changing needs of the innovation and research environment we're dealing with, and how our limited resources and precious resources can be best allocated. I can go into a bit perhaps about what we are doing, like the positive side of this, and how we are supporting innovation in agriculture in Canada. There are a broad range of tools, partnerships with academics, partnerships with industry, to ensure we're pushing in the right direction. We have our broad kind of partnership programs called the Sustainable Canadian Agriculture Partnership, the Sustainable CAP, we call it. You might have taken CAP from our EU friends in terms of agriculture support marketing, but this is a 5-year program, a funding framework where there's a large part of it going to science and research innovation in Canada. So we have agri-science programs at the federal level, which accelerate industry-led initiatives from pre-commercial stage and kind of looking at benefits across the sector. I would say the Agriculture Ministry, Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada is still the largest science provider in the country. So at any given time, there's between 600 to 900 projects going on, with about 2/3 of that in collaboration with external stakeholders, be it academic, be it industry, looking at both public goods and industry-specific needs. So it's well recognized that there is a need for continued investment in research in agriculture. It's the how, and as Dan pointed out, there's a lot of communication and consultation with industry in this regard. One last thing I would say, we did, there are some sector-specific areas. The government writ large has supported superclusters. So we have Protein Industry Canada, which aims to position Canada as a global leader in production of plant-based products. So there's a lot of bringing innovation and researchers together, bringing networks, the Canadian Agri-Food Automation Intelligence Network, our innovation networks, to really try to put this up. So if you look at it overall, we hope the infrastructure and the ecosystem for investment in research and development is there. And with ongoing dialogue, and as we continuously look at the needs of the sector, that we'll be able to support that in the best possible way.
So obviously room for improvement in any system, but your overall story is a positive story.
Indeed, I would like to say that. I think we recognize the importance that fundamental and foundational research, but also through the whole innovation pipeline is needed. Yeah.
Excellent. Okay, and this opening the door to speeding up opportunity for companies coming into Canada, can you speak at all to why that is happening now? So we talked about a shift happening, but where's that coming from?
I think you could look back at why now, and I think there's never been a better time to plant a tree.
Okay.
So don't worry about what's happened in the past, but more of, where do we need to go? And I think, in the last year, through all of the challenges that are happening globally, I would say, there's more and more opportunity to have conversation and more willingness for some conversation. And we see that there's a group called the Canadian Western Wheat Research Coalition, and they just recently hosted a workshop in one day that had the Canadian Barley Research Coalition, people from the University of Saskatchewan, from University of Manitoba, the Crop Development Center, which is University of Saskatchewan, Alberta, and Seeds Canada was there. And after that, at the end of that day, all of those parties aligned on what a new vision for wheat and barley could be. And I'm going to read it so I don't get it wrong. So the Western Canadian wheat and barley plant breeding system is a thriving, innovation-driven, where collaboration and competition coexist to attract diverse investment and provide farmers with choice and superior field-ready varieties that meet the need of our end-use customers. So that's the shared vision that group thought we need to go in the future. And I think what's exciting about that is it's not just public or private. It's together. It's not just multinationals. It's small, medium, and large companies that have that opportunity. I mentioned during my opening that we've got over 500 independent seed processors, opportunity for them to continue to grow. There's maybe some startups that happen from some global company that wants to come to Canada and partner with somebody and start a new organization. There's some joint ventures that happen already in Canada. So I think having that background, and through that there's some different areas of each. We had 9 different areas we thought were important. One was return on investment. That is critical because you need a return on investment if you're going to make a breeding investment. But also farmers, if they adopt new varieties, need to see a return on their investment as well and have all those products. And the seed processors, everybody in the whole ecosystem needs to have a return on the investment. So I think the why now is that it's that opportunity for conversation and dialogue and trust.
Yeah.
And so trust, I think, is critical across all of those areas to go in and have conversations with people, build trust, and say, what do we need for the farmer? And then how does everybody participate along that way where we can, be sustainable as businesses, which ultimately see everybody have some type of return, including the farmer, and then they adopt new technology, and it works well.
So we've talked about the why now. Let me add to that with you, Greg.
Mm-hmm.
Is it durable change? Is it going to stick?
Yes, I believe so. So, yeah, the why now, I think Dan outlined it quite well, but when you look at the macro level too, we have seen some very seismic shifts in terms of global geopolitics, and Government of Canada responded to that by building out our economic resilience. So I think that is indeed a long-term trend. Some of the investments that are being made are for the long term, looking at how Canada can be positioned in the future. But also I'd say some of our regulatory changes, like the clarity on gene editing, it's driven by science, it's driven by technological advancements. So it's not that the government was waiting to provide this guidance. It was looking at the ever-evolving science and innovation landscape and making sure that our regulations are fit for purpose. So it's this kind of constant improvement we're looking at in the regulatory process, either be it from red tape reduction or making sure our regulatory guidance is up to date and it can help Canadian companies through the innovation pipeline and access global markets.
So let me put you on the spot to recap our conversation. If our audience here that's live or our audience watching live online leaves with one thought. What is your biggest takeaway about Canada as a place for innovation and investment? Dan?
I have more than one thought.
Oh,
I'm gonna
more than one thought. Okay.
I'm gonna finish where I stared.
Okay.
Scale of opportunity, stability, structure, and inflection point.
I like it.
Yeah, I have many thoughts of why what your takeaway on Canada should be, but I would say this. Canada is a global agriculture leader in trade, in international cooperation, in innovation and regulatory development. We understand the importance of innovation, not only for the competitiveness of our sector, but also for food security, sustainability, and adapting to climate change. We understand the importance of science and risk-based approaches underpinning our regulatory frameworks, and the importance of international cooperation now more than ever, building those like-minded coalitions to advance advocacy so you have international alignment and you can try to have policy coherence globally. So I would say think of Canada as a destination where you have the talent, you have the regulatory and economic environment, and a place that should be considered.
And one last add is, I'd say Will. I think over my 25 years, I have never seen the government side. I've never seen being in a room with grower organizations, with everybody pulling the same way to want innovation and want to drive that to happen. Never in my 25 years have I seen all of that and being able to participate and talk with grower organizations. It's not companies or government saying this needs to happen. Mm-hmm. We're doing it together to build a better way.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Gentlemen, thank you for the chat. We appreciate you making time. This is live here at World Seed Congress, of course. It is also streaming live through ISF's channel World Seed and through Seed World. And it will also be available after the fact through both Seed World and ISF's channel World Seed. So I hope that people circle back on this conversation because you gave us an awful lot to dig into. I think we probably could have chatted for 3 hours instead of 30 minutes, but 30 minutes is a really great start.
Yeah.
Thank you to both of you for spending half an hour here.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Just while we have a small group of, well, not such a small group of people here, I wanted to do something totally different. And I wanted to bring my colleague Aidan up here on stage, if you don't mind sitting for just an extra moment. Aidan, you've got a microphone?
I think he's turning me on. Yep, perfect.
Is that live?
Perfect.
You go ahead.
So I think some of you might know that at Seed World Group, our mantra is people connecting people. And I'm here today to recognize someone that has spent his entire career doing exactly that. And not just connecting people, but organizations, innovations, and ideas across the globe. And some might actually say he's the glue that keeps it all together and keeps it going. So on behalf of the Seed World Group, I wanted to provide a Global Unity Award to Michael Keller for 2025.
Hey, Aidan, thanks so much. I take it, but I take it for ISF. I think it's the ISF team all together. We are doing this, and all associations together. But it's really, and I would like to emphasize here, wonderful relationship also with you folks. And I'm yet keen that we go together also to Canada next year. Thanks for that. Thanks for the trust, and we will continue. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Whoops, perfect.
That went well.
Thank you, gentlemen.